Hello children. In the previous session, we learned about some of the methods for the separation of substances. Now, in this session, let us learn a few more methods for the separation of substances from the lesson Separation of Substances, Class 6 Science. Learning outcomes. At the end of this session, you will be able to understand about evaporation, distillation, sublimation, chromatography, separation using more than one method, condensation, the amount of substance that can be dissolved in water, saturated solution. Keywords: mixture, a combination of two or more substances. Separation, evaporation, the process of conversion of liquid into gaseous state. Condensation, the process where water vapor is changed into liquid form. Saturated solution. Solution is one in which no more of that substance can be dissolved. Distillation, the process of heating water to form water vapors and then cooling the hot water vapors to get back liquid water. Sublimation, the process of converting a solid directly into a gas without passing through the liquid state. Chromatography, the process of separating mixture into individual components. Before starting, let us look at the concept map of this session. To understand evaporation, let us do an activity. Add 2 spoons of salt to water in a beaker and stir it well. We cannot see any salt in the beaker after stirring. Now, heat the beaker containing the salt water. Let the water boil away. Salt is left in the beaker. In this activity, we use the process of evaporation to separate a mixture of water and salt. The process of conversion of water into its vapor is called evaporation. Common salt is obtained from seawater by the process of evaporation. Let us do an activity to understand how distilled water, pure water, is obtained by the process of distilling of water. Fill a conical flask with water and close it with a cork having a hole. Insert a glass tube through the hole. Take another conical flask with a cork having a hole and insert another glass tube through it. Connect both tubes with a rubber tube. Now, heat the flask containing water using a burner. After some time, water vapor goes into the second conical flask through the glass tube. The water vapor will slowly turn into water. The water in the second conical flask is called distilled water. It is free from impurities. To understand sublimation, let's do an activity. Take a mixture of camphor and powdered salt in a china dish and cover it with a funnel. Close the tube of the funnel with cotton. Place the dish on a stand and heat it with a burner. We observe that when heated camphor directly changes into gaseous form, leaving the salt behind. Similarly, on cooling, the gaseous form of camphor changes directly into a solid without going to the liquid state. The process in which a substance changes directly from solid to gaseous form and vice versa is called sublimation. Can we separate colors from a mixture of colors? Let us do an interesting activity. Take a whole stick of white chalk. Around the curved surface of the chalk, put an ink mark with blue or black ink. Now, pour some water on a plate and keep the piece of chalk in the water. Ensure that the water in the plate is very little and does not touch the ink mark. The chalk observes water and we observe the color patterns are formed on the piece of chalk after some time. Remove the chalk before the water reaches its top. The ink appears to be made of single color, but it is actually a mixture of many colors hidden in it. This method is an example of chromatography. We have studied some methods for the separation of substances from their mixtures. Often, one method is not sufficient to separate the different substances present in the mixture. In such situations, we need to use more than one of these methods. To understand the separation of substances using more than one method, let us do an activity. Take a mixture of sand and salt. Keep this mixture in a beaker and add some water to it. Leave the beaker aside for some time. We see that the sand settles down at the bottom. This sand can be separated by decantation or filtration. Now, we need to separate salt and water from the decanted liquid. Transfer this liquid to a kettle and close its lid. Heat the kettle for some time. We notice steam coming out from the spout of the kettle. Take a metal plate with some ice on it. Hold the plate just above the spout of the kettle. When the steam comes in contact with the metal plate cooled with ice, it condenses and forms liquid water. The water drops that you observed falling from the plate were due to condensation of steam. The process of conversion of water vapor into its liquid form is called condensation. After all the water has evaporated, salt is settled at the bottom. We have thus separated salt, sand, and water using processes of decantation, filtration, evaporation, and condensation. To understand the amount of substance that can be dissolved in water, let's do an activity. Take a beaker, a spoon, salt and water. Pour half a cup of water into the beaker. Add 1 teaspoonful of salt and stir it well until the salt dissolves completely. Again, add a teaspoonful of salt and stir well. Go on adding salt, 1 teaspoonful at a time, and stir. After adding a few spoons of salt, we find that some salt remains undissolved and settles at the bottom of the beaker. This means that no more salt can be dissolved the amount of water we have taken. The solution now is said to be saturated. Let us do another activity to understand the amount of substance that can be dissolved in water. Take some water in a beaker and mix salt in it until it cannot dissolve any more salt. This will give you a saturated solution of salt in water. Now, add a small quantity of salt to the saturated solution and heat it. We find that the salt is dissolved in water. This activity suggests that a larger quantity of salt can be dissolved in water on heating. Water dissolves different substances in different amounts. Points to remember. Evaporation is the process in which a liquid gets converted into its vapor. Evaporation can be used to separate a solid dissolved in a liquid. The process of conversion of water vapor into its liquid form is called condensation. Distillation is used to remove impurities from water. The process in which a substance changes directly from solid to gaseous form and vice versa is called sublimation. A saturated solution is one in which no more of that substance can be dissolved. More of a substance can be dissolved in a solution by heating it. Water dissolves different amounts of soluble substances in it. Thank you for watching.